First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here today. And I want to start our meeting by repeating an oft-used phrase that is familiar to everyone here. It's a great day to be a Wildcat. And indeed, it is a great day to be a Wildcat. Everyone in this room is richly blessed by an affiliation with Davidson College. All the alumni here in particular are richly blessed by the incredible experience of attending this wonderful institution. And we're united at Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse, DFTD, and our common goal to help the college to the extent that we can, to be the very best version of itself that it can be. So I want to thank you again for being here today and participating in our event today. And in particular, I want to thank our board members who are here with us, who've worked very hard for the last 8 years to fulfill the mission statement of our organization. And if you will indulge me, I would like to read from the website where you can find our mission statement, but I would just like to repeat some of the phrases that you'll find there if you go to the Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse. Our mission is that DFTD aims to ensure a learning environment at Davidson College that is ideologically balanced and promotes a lively and fearless freedom of debate and deliberation. Our website says it well. Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse champions open dialogue at Davidson College. We do this by supporting student-led organizations, sponsoring events that bring a wide range of viewpoints to campus, and connecting alumni, faculty, and students who value honest inquiry and open dialogue on all issues. Our work helps keep Davidson College a place where ideas can be explored fully, respectfully, and without fear. And we seek to build on these values. Through our combined efforts as loyal alumni, DFTD seeks to ensure that a core value of Davidson is free inquiry, not indoctrination in any ideology or political viewpoint. We support a campus climate that is civil, respectful, tolerant of all, and grounded in Judeo-Christian values. We exist to encourage Davidson College Board of Trustees, the administration, faculty, and students to uphold the highest standards of a liberal arts education that fosters intellectual freedom, supports an unfettered search for the truth, and prepares students for productive and virtuous lives. That's who we are at DFTD. Here we are 8 years later after our founding, and why are we here 8 years later? And why are we talking about free speech today? Well, we're here because we care deeply about Davidson College. And we want to give back to Davidson College in constructive ways to the extent that we can. I once had a friend tell me that there are essentially two types of people in the world. Those that build people up with encouragement, unqualified support, life-giving support, and those that tear people down and divide with discouraging complaints and criticisms, always criticizing. There are those that engage in constructive acts and those that engage in discouraging or destructive acts. DFTD hopes that we're the former. Many of our brothers and sisters, unfortunately, do complain and criticize and tear each other down, dividing by their actions rather than uniting. We at DFTD want to build Davidson College up with loyalty, honesty, encouraging support for the college. But not all criticism is destructive or discouraging. Some of it is constructive. And some things need to be said. For example, diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, as it was originally implemented at Davidson College, some of us felt like it was divisive, fracturing groups of individuals into identity groups, calling some oppressors and some oppressed. We felt, some of us, that it was dividing, not uniting. And we objected to the ways that we felt like DEI was originally being implemented here at the college in various syllabi, where students were required to admit that they were oppressors of victim-oppressed classes, and in a video that all student athletes were required to watch, in which it was stated as fact that all white students were racist. It was constructive criticism, we believe, to object to DEI initiatives based on critical race theory. We did object, and the syllabi was removed, they were removed, and the video taken down. And we're proud of that. And the original board of DFTD played a central role in the adoption of Davidson's freedom of statement of expression. And without DFTD, it's not entirely clear that this would even exist today. Currently, and the good news is, the college maintains, and we've met with the DEI vice president, we've met with the president, and the college maintains that DEI at the college is being implemented in new, proactive, non-discriminatory ways, more literal ways, not in divisive ways. And we applaud these and all other efforts at unification. But some of us feel that the term itself, DEI, is divisive. It's politicized. It's code word. Some believe it's code words for invidious discrimination, dividing oppressors from oppressed, etc. So respectfully, some of us believe that the term needs to be abandoned because it's a hackneyed phrase. It's become politicized in the wider spectrum. But again, this is constructive criticism, and we applaud efforts at unification, and we applaud the efforts of the college to unify us all and their new implementation of their view of what needs to be done in this area. As many of us all will remember, several years back, a former college president changed the college bylaws about the Christian composition of the Board of Trustees and the requirement that the president of the college be a Christian. We objected to that. And when we criticized that, we weren't trying to tear anything down. We felt we were speaking the truth about the truth, the loyal opposition, if you will, in favor of Christian Judeo values that has been the strength historically of the college and this great country. But the overriding truth that we speak today is that we're all grateful to be part of the Davidson community, and we're all blessed to be Davidson Wildcats. And as encouraging builders, we want Davidson students, all Davidson students, to be as blessed as we were with the best liberal arts education out there based on values grounded in truth. Our vision at DFTD is that Davidson College maintain its tradition of providing a world-class liberal arts education where students are exposed to a variety of viewpoints on social issues and are taught to think critically for themselves and to engage in respectful civil discourse where viewpoints diverge. DFTD values intellectual honesty, academic rigor, inclusion, and diversity on all dimensions, including ideological viewpoints, free exchange and open debate of ideas, and a learning experience that prepares students to excel in careers after leaving the college. That is what DFTD is about, and that's who we are. We're proud Wildcats, loyal alumni, and we're hopefully builders, not detractors. We see ourselves as allies of the college. As stated, we want Davidson to be the best version of itself that it can possibly be, and we sincerely hope that all students at Davidson College are as richly blessed by the educational experience they have at the college that we were as alumni. So again, I want to welcome everybody to our annual meeting. We're looking forward to today's speakers, and I think the speakers are going to give us some words of wisdom that we can all benefit from as we seek to build on the rich tradition of this college. In just a moment, I'm going to introduce our featured speaker, Dr. Bill Winkenwerder. We're going to have a panel discussion with former and present student, and we're going to talk about the current climate on campus and what it was a few years ago. And then we're going to end with a member of our board, Connie Buehler, who's going to bring our meeting full circle to talk about how a Davidson College education can prepare students for productive lives in the workplace. Because as we all know, we want not only ideological balance at the college, but we want a learning experience that prepares students to excel in careers after they leave Davidson. And so Connie's going to talk to us about that. But before I conclude my remarks, and these are just introductory remarks to bring on our speakers, I want to share with you one particular way that we're trying to help build up the college in constructive ways. That is by collaborating with the college on its newly announced Institute for Public Good. This is a very exciting initiative of President Hicks, which we fully support. If you are not familiar with it, I would urge you to go to the college's website, look it up under the Institute for Public Good. There's quite a few articles on it, and it's a very, very exciting initiative. And it clearly will help all students and will open new and important discussions on campus about civic engagement, civic responsibility, ethics, honor, leadership. Very important. The Institute is the perfect opportunity, we believe, for the college to increase viewpoint and ideological diversity on campus with an emphasis on a classic liberal arts education in the truest sense of the words. And we are excited to offer our constructive encouragement and assistance for this initiative in any way that we can. Our board believes that the implementation of the Institute for Public Good, if done right, will help fulfill our core mission to help ensure, you'll recall the words I just stated them, a learning environment that is ideologically balanced and that promotes fearless freedom of expression. So again, thank you for coming out today. You know, we don't have this on Friday. We don't want to interfere with the college events. If we had it on Friday, we would have much greater attendance because people are coming to town. So we appreciate those that have come here early to join us today. And we look forward to a good discussion about what DFTD is trying to do in constructive ways to help the college students have the very best learning experience possible. But I would like to end my remarks by saying the same thing I said when I started. It's always a great day to be a Wildcat. Why? Because all Wildcats, despite any differences that may exist between them, fundamentally love each other. And we're committed to help in constructive ways show that love for our beloved alma mater. So with these introductory remarks, it's going to now be my privilege to introduce our featured speaker for our event here today, Dr. Bill Winkenwerder. Bill is a graduate of Davidson College and a former member of the college's Board of Trustees, where he served for many years in distinction. He's a nationally recognized physician and healthcare executive who served as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs under President George W. Bush and as a senior leader at the Department of Health and Human Services under President Ronald Reagan. He's a graduate of the University of North Carolina School of Medicine, and he received his Master's of Business Administration for the Wharton School of Business. Pretty smart guy. And he has a long-standing dedication to public service, and his commitment to robust, open discussion on critical issues of foreign and domestic policy have been a hallmark of his distinguished career. And we're very excited that he's our supporter and he's our speaker today. Come on up, Bill, and talk to us.
Well, it's a good crowd here today. Thank you, Richard, for that warm and nice introduction. And thanks to all of you for being here on a busy weekend to hear about Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse and the work that they're doing at the college. I thought I'd start my comments by noting that we are approaching, as everybody knows, the 250th anniversary of this country. And in 1 month from now, almost to the day, July 4th, it'll be our 250th birthday. It's hard to think of anything more important today and in the history of this country than freedom of speech. And freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, the right of the people to peaceably assemble. So I want to read just a few words from my copy of the U.S. Constitution. I carry this around with me from time to time, which says, with the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble. I think that's important to note, peaceably, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's it, that one little phrase, and you think about how important that is to our entire history. It's incredible. So much sort of cascades off of that. So while I'm not on the board of DFTD, I've been almost from the start a supporter of this independent alumni organization. That's because I care deeply about Davidson and want to encourage those in charge to take the needed steps, the necessary steps to ensure that our college has great long-term health. And this requires delivery on the fundamental mission of providing high-quality education that produces productive members of society. I want to give a little bit of history here. In 2018, during my tenure as a board trustee, which was from January 2015 to January 2022, a group of prominent alumni with intimate knowledge and firsthand experience of things that were going on at Davidson came together to form DFTD. They were business and political leaders, a former governor, former trustees, strong contributors to the college, and John Craig, who's here with us here today, who has a lifetime of experience in matters of higher learning and academia. Their principal concerns were threats to freedom of expression and lack of viewpoint diversity on campus. They were convinced that students cannot learn to think critically if they are not exposed to a range of ideological points of view on controversial topics, and that students will not learn to argue cogently or to act responsibly if they're afraid to speak their minds in the classroom and on the campus generally. That's where DFTD started. But in the years since, as the group learned more about the state of affairs at the school, its concerns broadened to include questions about academic standards, the high cost of a Davidson education, and I'll get into that for a minute, great inflation, and the comments that Richard made about DEI. Early in its life, Davidson, or DFTD, convinced an organization known as the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE is the short name, acronym, convinced FIRE to add Davidson to its highly regarded annual surveys on the state of freedom of expression at prominent universities and colleges across the country. The FIRE surveys confirmed what had been reported anecdotally by Davidson students. So I want to share, if we can bring up the slides are supposed to appear overhead. Yes, share some of these results. What this particular slide shows is that roughly 2/3 of Davidson students are afraid to disagree with a professor in a class discussions. So you can see it's actually come down a little bit, but that's a pretty high number. I think most would agree. Next slide. Let's look at upwards of 50%, close to 50%. It had been above 50% of students are afraid to express their personal views on controversial topics in the classroom. Okay, this is the percent of being uncomfortable in expressing their views on campus on controversial topics. So that's a pretty big number, I think. Next slide. This is the percent that viewed it as acceptable to shout down a speaker to prevent them from speaking on campus. That's a pretty remarkable number. Next slide. And then acceptable for students to block other students from attending a campus speech. Not as high, but still notable. Okay, next slide. This is the one that really caught my attention. View it as acceptable for students to use violence to stop a campus speech. So it's not a big number, but it says to me there are a good, number of people who feel that that's appropriate or not, it's acceptable. I don't know how you react to those. When I first saw these numbers, I was pretty shocked. So let's move along. So all of this at Davidson, I'd say for me anyways, it was hard to believe. And the question that came to my mind was, how do we get here? How do we get to this place where this is the views that are held by a good number of students? Now you can, I suppose, and some have who've seen these criticize and say, well, that's an overstatement or the sampling is wrong. If it's anywhere near these numbers, that's something to be concerned about. But Davidson, I should note, is far from alone among elite U.S. higher education institutions in having these problems. In 2025, the Manhattan Institute, it's a respected think tank, put together the first set of university and college rankings based not just on the usual metrics, but on addressing as well questions such as, does a college encourage respectful discussion and vigorous debate? Is the curriculum strong, or is the university coasting on an old reputation? Does the school force divisive ideology on its students? Do administrators prioritize activism over education or even tolerate chaotic circumstances? Does the university prepare students to learn enough to pay back their tuition and thrive as citizens and workers in the 21st century? This new rating system was applied to the 100 most highly regarded schools in the country, and the results are pretty sobering. On a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being a very top score, the top score among these schools was 72, and the median was 46. Only 2 institutions scored 70 or above. That was the University of Florida and the University of Texas at Austin. Davidson's score was 51, just above the median, which was the same as Princeton's. Harvard's was 48, and the lowest was Vassar's at 29. So it's findings such as these that help explain why trust in higher education has declined in the United States in recent years. Just a decade ago, 57% of Americans, this was I think a Gallup poll, expressed a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in higher education. But by 2024, that number had dropped to a historic low of 36%. Among independents and Republicans, that number is even lower, in the range of 25 to 30%. 70% of Americans say that higher education is heading in the wrong direction. This was just last year, so it's pretty fresh information. Besides free speech suppression, other reasons for public distrust in colleges and universities are the high cost of higher education, rampant or perceived to be rampant grade inflation, the pronounced left-of-center ideological bias of many faculty and administrators, and a focus on activism instead of academic study and measurable outcomes. So it's not a surprise that American parents and youth are increasingly questioning the rate of return of a costly higher education experience. DFTD's hope is that Davidson can break loose from the pack and distinguish itself, as Richard has said, by championing freedom of expression, diversifying its faculty and board of trustees from an ideological point of view, and getting on top of burgeoning costs and addressing head-on problems like grade inflation. Just on the cost issue, the annual all-in cost, I don't know if you're aware of this, of 1 year at Davidson has risen to around $92,000. $92,000 for 1 year of college, all in. And the college last year proudly announced that this year's tuition would increase only 6%, which is, 3% inflation at the time, so it's not even consistent with that. So for reference and what that amount means, because I'm sure you're trying to compute to what we paid, some of us here on our 50th or even earlier, the all-in cost for those of us who graduated in 1976 was around $4,500 a year. If you take that number and multiply it by 4%, 5% a year, it would be around $40,000 to $45,000. So that's, the actual cost is like 2 to 3 times that. So I think it's fair that a lot of parents and families have questions about what's the value that we're getting for those dollars. And if you need any further proof about grade inflation at Davidson, you don't need to look further than the percentage of seniors, this was an interesting statistic we found, graduating with cum laude or higher is now at 70%. 70%. That was up from around 25% just 10 years ago. So everybody's better than average, and we know what that's like woebegone, right? Far better than average. I don't know what it was during my time, but I suspect it was only about 10 or 15%. I know that if you were fit into that, you were like, okay, this is a small group. I mean, I guess if you want to tell everybody that they're better than average, that's fine, but I'm not sure how well it serves the understanding of the students to understand how they actually compare with other students. So let me shift now to the DFTD's first request of the college in 2018 was to address problems that it formally adopt a statement of commitment to freedom of expression. I think you mentioned this, Richard, which is important. I wanted to emphasize it again. It's modeled on the standard was created by the University of Chicago in 1979. There was resistance at first. I remember it. I was here. I was on the trustee board. Didn't want to sign it, but went back and forth, and I'll give great credit to former Governor Jim Martin, who got involved and along with John and others, and negotiated with the school such that a statement was produced. And I'm delighted to report that a framed copy of this statement of commitment to freedom of speech now is in the front hallway of Chambers. So go by there and see it if you haven't. I think that's a great accomplishment. So I'm not going to go through all the things that DFTD is doing because I think you covered a lot of those, Richard, and including, being a bit of a watchdog. I will note that DFTD works with campus student organizations to bring speakers to campus. And examples are people like the supply side economist Art Laffer. Agree or disagree with him and his philosophy, economics. He had an enormous impact on this country for decades in terms of the influence with administrations through the 80s and into the 90s even. And then we had a prominent national security leader, General Jack Keane, here last fall. And I supported this event for General Keane as part of a planned ongoing annual lecture on the Middle East and foreign affairs. There was a reasonable turnout, I don't think it was as much as we have here today, but it was an okay turnout. But nobody, not one person from the college administration, and I don't believe a single faculty member attended that event. It's unfortunate because General Keane, I think, was pretty well recognized as one of the most respected and knowledgeable national security experts in the world today. And he gave a great talk, a tour de force on every area of the world. It was really impressive. So I just would note that that's a little bit of a contrast from the speeches that Ibram Kendi and Ta-Nehisi Coates gave in 2015 and 2020, which were heavily promoted by the college and by President Quillen at that point. Free books were distributed, and I think I heard reports that there were thousands of people who attended those events. So, looking for the balance here. Finally, DFTD, as Richard said, has a regular dialogue with President Hicks and others, and it can bring issues before, and I think there's what looks to me like an effective ongoing communication and discussion. So you might ask, well, is all of this making any difference? Is free speech and viewpoint diversity climate at Davidson getting any better? Well, there's some evidence that it is. You can see in the next couple of charts that the share of students unsure that the college protects free speech has been declining, although it's still at 17%. You can see that right there. So it's improved, but it's still there. And the share of students who think it's unlikely that the administration would defend the rights of a controversial campus speaker has also fallen, but it's still almost a quarter of students. So work to do. The two initiatives that Richard mentioned, I won't repeat, but the deliberative citizenship initiative to get people to understand better how to talk to each other, and then this newly announced Institute for Public Good, which is still under development, I guess, in terms of the format, the programs, and the participants. But DFTD will be much involved in that. So there are indications beyond Davidson that these kinds of concerning developments, and some might say failures of higher education in the U.S. are not beyond repair. So example, this April, just about 6 weeks ago, the Yale Faculty Committee on Trust in Higher Education, commissioned by Yale's president, importantly, issued a report, 80 pages, I read it, with hard-hitting recommendations to address free speech, the presence of intellectual pluralism, in other words, saying that any philosophy from anywhere is about the same. They're all just, we'll just take note of it. But nothing special about Western values that most of us learned here at Davidson. The lax standards of coursework and grading and the problems of cost. All the same things we're talking about here. They wrote a very extensive report on that, and I believe Davidson would benefit from having a similar self-examination that digs in on these same issues, because they're the same here, they're the same in many places. There's also a growing number of alumni groups like the FTD at leading universities and colleges arguing for reforms to advance freedom of expression and viewpoint diversity. The FTD was a founding member of the association of these groups, some 30 institutions now, and I think, Connie, you're going to tell us a little bit more about that. I won't steal your message, but she's really important in all of this in helping lead it forward. Also led by the early actions of Vanderbilt and Washington University, 90 universities and colleges have now adopted a formal policy of what's called institutional neutrality on political and ideological issues, whereby the college or university can speak out, but only on issues that affect itself. In other words, they're not out trying to take the megaphone and say, you know, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing for debates and issues across society. Importantly, the U.S. Supreme Court, controversial decision in the Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard and University of North Carolina, by the way, took a pretty clear stand to ban race-based admissions program in universities and colleges, and that's beginning to have some effect. Just 2 weeks ago, another report from Harvard, who established a similar group to Yale, after awarding, to deal with a bunch of different things, but after awarding A's to 70% of students in courses, that was the average up until recently. So if you expected an A, basically, but now that number is going to be limited to 20%, is what Harvard says. So no more than 20% of the grades in a class can be A's. And then finally, we learned just a few days ago that the University of California, in which in 2020 had dropped standardized testing such as the SAT and ACT, has restored them. And why did they do that? They did that after they heard from some 750 professors who said the students who were coming in were so unprepared that they needed to be taught middle school math and basic courses in order to be able to move forward in the sciences and economics and other quantitative fields. So the message here is there are many schools, many universities are moving forward to address these issues, and we are not alone in doing what we're trying to do here. So I'll conclude by saying that much remains to be done at Davidson. While the current administration is quietly following, it seems, the institutional neutrality policy, I think it would be beneficial for the college to formally adopt that. More importantly, it's urgent, in my view, that the college take steps to create some diversity, a thought diversity, among faculty and board of trustees. I don't see any indication yet that the college recognizes that this is a problem. So that makes it a challenge. But I'll tell you why I believe that. As a trustee for 7 years, I chaired the academic committee at Davidson College. So as a committee, we interviewed every single hire on the faculty and every single person that was up for promotion for tenure. And I learned that these faculty members, although very bright, very passionate, and they were nice people, but they always held one political point of view. I saw no evidence of any viewpoint diversity, if you will, among this group. I would add that the trustee board had, during my time, 7 years, 2 members, possibly 3, who might have labeled themselves as conservative or Republican, out of 35. So it was like 11-to-1 balance, one side to the other. So again, no issues with the quality of the people, their love for Davidson or whatever, but how they came at issues was always going to be lopsided. And that's just the way it was. There was also a little bit of a factor of age in that we had very few trustees. I think at one point I may have been the oldest or second oldest of all the trustees. This was a few years ago. So it was all pretty much everybody that was new was a younger person. And it got so significant, the feedback came that you need to get some people who've had, lots of life experiences and some wisdom. And there were a couple of changes that were made there. So the final thing I'll just touch on is this matter of cost, and that we have a cost problem. This problem, in my view, and I think there's evidence for this, can be solved by strong leadership. Turns out at Purdue University between 2013 and 2022, over a 11-year period, President Mitch Daniels, who had also been a governor, who had been the head of the Office of Management and Budget, and he looked at their budgets and said, and tuition's going up, and said, we need to really take this on. He took it on in such a significant way. They had no tuition or other increases for 10 years. That's hard to believe. None. Stayed flat for 10 years. And they did that by cutting bloat and waste and doing, I don't know what all they did. You might say, well, that was bound to hurt academics. No. The Purdue rose in all the rankings and scores and outcomes. People wanted to be part of an institution that was well run and that was efficient and effective. So I think I'd love to see us take that as, as an example of what we might try to do. So I'll conclude by saying, it's no surprise that wealthy, elite colleges and universities are typically loath to undertake serious self-examination and are pretty resistant to any external feedback. But it's my view that DFTD, despite its limited size and budget, and despite the resistance from many quarters in the community, has done Davidson a great service in pushing it to recognize and deal with significant problems and to actually make changes that are needed. These issues we have discussed, if not addressed, will impair Davidson's future, in my opinion. So my hat is off to DFTD and the board and staff for the work you're doing. And I encourage you all to support this organization, and I thank you for your attention today. I'm happy now to take a question or two if you've got anything that's burning. If not, we can hear from the students. But thank you again for coming. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Any questions? One or two? If not, yes.
Dr. Winkenwerder, good evening. My name is Dr. Fugar. I am a writing sophomore here at Davidson College. I have a question. First of all, again, thank you very much for conducting this event.
Sure.
I am presently a student journalist with the Davidson Ducks, a magazine here on campus. I had a question concerning your thoughts on viewpoint diversity here on Davidson College campus, because there is presently a lot of concerns about the country as to how exactly viewpoint diversity mandates will be implemented at schools.
Yeah.
Because if I could extend this question a bit more, because in certain cases, this is what critics argue, because in certain cases these mandates are being enforced by state legislatures. And so there's a lot of concerns about the politicization of these mandates.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what your thoughts are.
That's a very good question. It's a great point. And, frankly, I agree, I think, with what you're saying. And that is that viewpoint diversity is not something in my opinion, that we should be trying to mandate. It should come from people who want and have a strong interest in ensuring debate, fairness, discourse. So it should, we should want it to be that way without having to try to force it. I think probably the best thing next to something like, just coming out of people's hearts is pointing out where there's a lopsided discussion and we're not hearing from different members of the community that we should hear from. And we all have there's a history here for other groups that have not been heard, historically, that it's unfortunate. They should have been. So I think we're trying to get to a place where people can be heard and can debate and come up with the best decisions. That's really the essence of our system. But thank you for that question. Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great talk. Fantastic alumni here. That's what it's all about, is service to our community and to our country. And Bill Winkenwerder has shown that he's a leader. And that's what Davidson produces, is leaders, and leaders who serve. And we're very proud of his support for our organization. I'm now going to call upon some students. We have a present student, we have a couple of recent graduates, and we're just going to have a little bit of discussion. We're running a little bit behind on our schedule, but we're going to have a discussion. So if I could get the four of you, I've got one extra that I'm not going to call upon. I've got 4 seats, so y'all come on up. And we're going to have a discussion about free speech at Davidson from the perspective of recent graduates, a current student, and so forth. And we did this a couple of years